As much as we might hate and struggle with it, aloneness is a really normal and often very important part of the awakening journey. You might find yourself alone because as you've evolved in your awakening path, you've made big internal changes and you found that relationships have fallen away. So sometimes we're alone because we've had relationship losses or ends of partnerships and important connections. Sometimes we find ourselves alone even though we have those things. We're happily married, we have children we love caring for, a workplace we go to that's aligned, and loving friends, and yet still we're alone. And that's often because all of those loving people around us that are good for us are not necessarily going through the awakening journey. They are supportive and positive, but at the same time, you feel this very intense pull to withdraw and go inward. So you can be alone amongst love, amongst community, amongst family. And that's also very normal and at the same time painful. It can feel painful and almost like it cuts you, that there's this kind of slicing off of you and the external world and the relationships around you. That doesn't mean they're not fun and fantastic and amazing, but certain parts of your life are deeply isolated, deeply inward and alone. And this is natural. There are phases in the awakening journey and Kundalini. They can be consistent for a long period of time, or you can kind of find yourself flowing in and out of them where the pull inward is intense. It's like the tide pulls away from the world and pulls deeply into your internal experience. Your entire and most fascinating curiosity is with your awakening. And this is what I commonly hear from people on the awakening path. My number one interest is in Kundalini. My number one interest is in awakening. Everything else is falling away. Even if you're still going to work, still raising children, it becomes primary. The aloneness and the isolation and the loneliness are in a way a kind of initiation and sacred part of this path that actually allow you to be very, very close to your awakening journey. It's where your lens turns away from the world and deeply inward. There's a lot of learning and growth and insight, and importantly, there's an incredible amount of personal and self-mastery and mastery of the awakening journey that's going on in this phase. You're literally putting down the framework, building the muscles, the strength and the skills to become exceptionally good at going through awakening. And that later allows you to re-emerge into the world. It's the skills and the foundation you build in this phase that allows you to be successful in the long term. So as much as we might feel that isolation and loneliness to be heartbreaking, and of course it is and it can be, it's important that we open doors to see that in another way as a positive, natural and supportive part of the awakening journey. Of course, when you first experience this, you're going to hurt. And that's natural. We're still experiencing sometimes a lot of loss and life change that comes with the awakening path, and losing relationships and moving into isolation and feeling separate from the people that you love at times hurts. One of the things that I suggest you look out for in this phase is you watch out for your inner critic, because your inner critic is going to come for you in this phase and it's going to put you down. It will judge you, it will shame you, it will make you feel bad and guilty that there is something wrong with you, but that you are going through a phase of inwardness, isolation, hermitage, loneliness, and aloneness. It's critical that you watch out for this critic, because otherwise, you're going to get stuck and you're going to identify that with that perspective and think that it's true, rather than seeing this as a sacred and important phase of your journey. The second thing to watch out for is to look out for society's judgments and concepts that aloneness and isolation, being withdrawn and inward and hermity, is somehow wrong. We live in a very outwardly driven, consumerist, go, 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 out, 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 be seen, be successful, be constantly signaling your identity in the world. And then suddenly you pull inward and away from all of those things and you experience the opposite, which is quiet, insularness, aloneness. And if you're not clear that this is an important phase of your journey where you're putting down your foundations for your future success, you're going to join those collective voices and be very hard on yourself about being alone. The third thing that's important is to process your feelings that come up. There's going to be a phase where you're going to feel the pain of loneliness or isolation. You're going to feel sad and disconnected, and that's normal as you get used to it. And I encourage you to process it in whatever way is helpful. Tools that you have to process feelings, therapy, just connecting with others in community that are going through this can help you to normalize this. And at some point, hopefully you get to the point where you can just allow yourself to soften into the aloneness. You can let yourself sink into the isolation, because inside that there is actually a beauty, and that beauty is your incredible capacity to be with yourself. What births there is your profound ability to love you no matter who you are, where you are, and how you are. That is the fundamental task that's being asked of you. And there's a lot of personal power and self-realization that comes in that part of the journey. There's often in this isolation phase commonly a lot of processing of personal history, and you actually need the isolation. You need that sense of withdrawing inward and away from the world. Even if you're holding down a job in the mainstream world, you come home and you find half an hour at the end of the day after you've tucked your kids into bed, or the time when you're driving home from dropping your kids off at school, this tiny little bit of space where you actually get to live out your awakening in your very busy modern life. So how much time we get to spend there varies, but generally what's happening is there's a huge review of your life and your personal history, your ancestors, maybe past lives are coming up, and generally there's a lot of processing of personal pain and a kind of building of self-honoring and of self-love. And there's no navigating around that. This is an important phase of the awakening process, and it's going to happen whether you want it to happen or not. The other thing I really encourage you to do is to see loneliness as a doorway, that aloneness and isolation are like the artist studio of your awakening. And if you have the courage and you can surrender and you can go through that doorway into this artist studio, you can participate and watch the most incredible and profound transformation taking place, where a lot of things that normally would be very hard to shift, trauma, potent emotions, ancestral history, suffering, is leaving. Kundalini is doing the work, and you just get to allow. You also get to have amazing insights. You begin to understand much more clearly what this spiritual path is about, what it's asking you, how to work it, how to walk it, how to thrive on it, how to appreciate it, and how to appreciate your life, your quirky, unusual, maybe weird life compared to the mainstream. How do you fall in love with a life that's so different from how you're being taught to live and maybe have been indoctrinated to live your entire life? This is the big, juicy stuff that's happening inside isolation. You are having the opportunity to be withdrawn away from all those voices, to witness conditioning, to witness inappropriate beliefs, to witness things that have been put in your way or you put in your way, and clearing the field. And when people can allow and go through that doorway into the artist studio of Awakening and Kundalini and what she's making your life into and what is blossoming in you, if you can go through that doorway and hang out in that space and make peace with it and accept it, even appreciate it, because appreciation will grow and gratitude will grow, because if you give it space, you will fall in love with what is growing in there. But it takes time and it takes trust to get used to this amazing artist studio. And sometimes it's got a fire and all these things are going in the fire and you're sitting there going, wow, I have to put that in the fire and I have to put that in the fire and I have to surrender that. And at the same time as you're surrendering, something else is growing. So I encourage you to see if you can surrender your judgments, your conditioned beliefs, your fears, that you're going to be lonely forever, that you're never going to find anyone who can be aligned with you, that no one's ever going to want you because you're this crazy, wild, quirky, weird, completely interested in awakening being. I tell you, there are millions out there like you. And as you become who you are, you will become radiant and magnetic with your awakening, and they will find you. They will show up somewhere. They will pop up in your life when it's the right time. So when do these people show up in your life? When do these amazing collaborators and partners and friends and community show up? They show up usually when you're ready. And you don't always get to choose when you're ready. Your personality, your identity can go, I'm ready, mate. I'm ready. Bring it on. Where are the people? Where's the partner? Where's my new friends? Where's the new people to play with? There's a longing in you. But what I generally see happen is that will still be held out until your structure has consolidated enough that you can sustain the new people entering into your life without it knocking you off path or overwhelming the sacred blossoming that's happening. So there's usually a kind of really important growth of muscle and bone and structure and grit and ground of your awakening so that it's sturdy, that people can come and go, you can test new relationships out, you can go on some dates, and you're coherent, like you don't lose yourself, your alignment, your purity, and your process as you do that. And also, sometimes it takes time for us to evolve more into that new structure and to really enjoy it and understand it and be coherent in what we are and what's right for us. And to develop that sort of very necessary part of our awakening, which is to be very clear what is right and what is wrong for us, because the more you awaken, the more protective you need to be and the more supportive and aligned the choices you need to be of your awakening. And that includes with who you let in and out of your life. And you'll find you become very particular with that. So these are all the juicy things that are going on inside a very unconventional, isolating aloneness. My final tip would be also, there's a difference between being alone, which is simply the experience of being on your own, being very close and being very sort of self-inward and engaged in yourself, and loneliness. Sometimes we have a lot of personal history with loneliness. Maybe we were alone at school. Maybe we were always a sensitive kid. Maybe we were bullied. Maybe we were different. So we often have these very big sort of historical stories. Maybe you come from a marginalized population. Maybe you're a person of color or a gay person who already felt an outsider, and suddenly you have another experience on top of that that makes you feel more of an outsider. So it's important for us to sit with these histories and the pain behind them and process them and find our healing and our peace and to resolve the trauma around it. Sometimes loneliness for some of us is actually a pre-existing trauma that's actually separate from the artist studio of isolation that's a part of our transformation, and both of them can often require attention. And as you care for your history with that story, and for some of us it's been a very painful part of our identity, especially if you were a person that was just born spiritual, born naturally interested in awakeness, you're born psychic. Any of these things is going to make you at times more marginal and different. And so you already have that story there. You may also have found that you loved being alone as a child, so that will also help you to be in the aloneness phase. But it can be also really helpful to ask questions: what is alone? Who is alone? To sit with the different feelings that arise and develop your capacity and your tolerance for them so that you have more space to be able to enter into that artist studio and go through that very foundational transformation, because it will make you, and I have seen this universally over the decades I've been doing this work, universally those who go through that phase become pretty magnificent. Really, they do. And you will too in your awakening. And I love, love, love your magnificence. And one of the things that's so inspiring and touching is when you go through this phase, there's a really amazing unique beauty to who you become in your awakening, because we're all here to be our own sort of luminous expressions and unique expressions of the divine and of awakening. And this is a crucible that really begins to perfect and highlight what is your unique magnificence in awakening. And you know, some of the qualities I've seen evolve in people has been, for some people, wild sense of humor that have me just laughing to tears. Some people, it's like a profound seriousness and an incredible capacity to just hold awakening at an unyielding depth that they would never have ever been able to do if they didn't spend time in that artist studio and that crucible of isolation, because that particular ability to be profoundly serious about awakening is their purpose, is why they're here. They're here to walk this life, even if no one knows, being able to be unyielding from their particular flavor and expression of awakening. And most of the time, that comes out of that crucible of aloneness. So step into there, be curious, embrace it in however you can. And feel free to share in the comments or send me an email or let me know, let the community know what grew in you, what is growing in you. Be curious right now. Let the critic drop away, let your fears take the back seat and actually ask the questions. What is growing inside me in this isolation? What is blossoming? What do I have access to? What spiritual insights are growing in me? What love is bursting open in my heart? What self-care is emergent? What freedom? Even if it's a freedom from an idea, a belief, a system. What insights, what understanding of soul, source, spirit, love is flowing through from this crucible. It's worth it. You can do it, and you can turn it into your own transformational vessel, and you'll look back and you'll go, wow, what an awesome thing happened inside the artist studio of my aloneness. I wish you well. I know beautiful things will grow there, and I look forward to how things expand for you on the other side, because there is another side. I see that almost universally. A few people have quite extended periods of that because there's often something incredibly rigorous inside their isolation, and sometimes there's some sort of personal style and preference for that as well. But in general, for most people, life blossoms back into relationship and back into community and back into connection and love and partnership and marriage and families and babies and all the things. All these things cycle back to be included into your expression and your ground as an awakening and awakened being.